All right, so more concerning news from Twitter. Now, I don't know how much you guys tune into the streaming world. I admittedly do not. I am not super familiar with the online geography of streaming. Let me be clear, I'm no expert on that. That being said, I am consistently alarmed by what's going on streaming platforms. We'll get more into that in a second, but the reason why I'm talking about this, as some of you may have guessed, is because of the French live streamer who died. His name was Raphaël Gravant, but he went as JP online as far as I understand. So there are clips of this floating around on the internet of his lifeless body and things that were happening before on stream. Strongly suggest you skip them. I came across them against my will, just posted on Twitter, screen recordings, so just beware of all of that. Tortured, abused by two others for days on live stream, French influencer dies. French streamer Raphaël Gravant, known for extreme online challenges, has died following alleged abuse during live broadcasts. A French streamer known for participating in extreme online challenges has died, prompting a judicial investigation. Raphaël Gravant, 46, also known online as Jean Pormanove, or JP, was found dead at his home in Comte near Nice following a live broadcast. According to reports, Gravant had endured 10 days and nights of torture, including severe physical violence and sleep deprivation. His followers raised the alarm after noticing him lying unresponsive on a mattress during the live stream. One viewer reportedly saw a man throw a water bottle at him while he remained motionless. French newspaper Le Monde reported that Gravant had been involved in online content involving humiliation and violence. Authorities say he was subjected to ongoing abuse and public humiliation in recent months. The news portal reported that Raphaël, a former soldier, was routinely beaten and abused by two fellow influencers during live streams. Clara Chapaz, no idea, a government minister, called the case an absolute horror and confirmed a judicial probe is underway. We'll get to discussing the platform that this occurred on, because that is very much part of the conversation right now, because as you can imagine, shit like this doesn't happen on YouTube and Twitch. This happened on Kick. Now, that might not seem like an integral part of the conversation, but it actually is, in my opinion. YouTube, Twitch, and other platforms like that are not completely unconnected from platforms like Kick. Because a lot of the reason that I see people going on Kick, from what I understand, is that there is less control and censorship, which sounds like a good thing, generally speaking. Not being censored, being able to, not get copyrighted every 5 seconds like you might on YouTube is great. At the same time, it does allow for certain behaviors to go unchecked. And that's the thing about Kick, is that in moderation, it doesn't have to be harmful. But because people go to these extremes, there are then platforms like YouTube and Twitch which censor a lot and moderate a lot, which can be a good thing, obviously. But on the other hand, for people who are not doing anything wild or outside of the norm, they also are censored. Does that make sense? So as much as I think Kick is to blame, for not moderating, for not stepping in, for not doing anything about this type of content on their platform, people go to Kick because YouTube and Twitch are the way they are. Does that make sense? So it's like people go to this extreme because this is another extreme. People are demanding for a response out of Kick that allowed all of this to go on. And I think a big part of that is also that this wasn't happening over the span of an hour, right? This is one of Kick's top streamers in France with a huge following who did this for 10 days. So you'd think someone would have noticed, seen, and I don't know how Kick works, but sent an alert, a warning of, hey, you need to stop with this content or we'll have to step in, something. Or even JP's family, friends of the other streamers who were there. It's just so odd to me that this seemed to kind of happen in a bubble where seemingly nobody stepped in or said anything. Obviously, that we know of. It's possible that these people were getting texted and warned and all these things that we don't know. But it seems like Kick, the platform, did not step in at all. So here there's a tweet by the government minister I mentioned, Clara Chapaz. So it says, "The death of Jean-Pierre Pormanove and the violence he suffered are an absolute horror. I extend my deepest condolences to his family and loved ones. Jean Pormanove was humiliated and mistreated for months live on the Kick platform. A judicial investigation is underway. I have referred the matter to ARCOM and made a report on Pharos." I don't know what any of those are. Okay, so ARCOM is the French regulatory authority for audiovisual and digital communication. So as you can see in the rest of this description, basically it is there as a form of regulatory system. If we move on, Pharos is a little bit of a similar situation where you report illegal or harmful online content. So it seems like both of these are almost like an internet police of sorts. Clearly, there are issues here, but I suppose this is a start if something is done about it. I have also contacted the platform's management to obtain explanations. The responsibility of online platforms regarding the dissemination of illicit content is not optional, it is the law. This type of failure can lead to the worst and has no place in France, Europe, or anywhere else. So then it goes on to say, Sarah El Heri, France's High Commissioner for Children, described the incident as horrifying in a statement on social media. She wrote, platforms have an immense responsibility in regulating online content so that our children are not exposed to violent content. I call on parents to exercise the utmost vigilance. So the reason why I think that this is also interesting in a somewhat separate way is that it is very much shining a light on the type of content that people are choosing to consume. Like I said prior, I think the censorship on certain websites, on certain platforms generally, is part of the problem because it makes people resort to going on platforms where there is seemingly no regulation, which is also its own can of worms, very obviously. That being said, it's also the fact that people are tuning into this, right? Because apparently, as this article said, this content creator was doing these challenges, which I don't know if the challenges were always this extreme, but that means that there's clearly an audience for that type of stuff. And I'm really wondering if that audience comes from a place of morbid curiosity or if it's coming from the place of kind of like when you have a parent who tells you, hey, no matter what you do, don't watch this one movie, don't watch this one movie, and they keep telling you to not watch the movie. What's going to happen when you're alone and have the opportunity to watch the movie? You might watch the fucking movie because you've been told constantly to not. While I don't think Kick can be solely blamed for this, and neither can YouTube or any other platform, I do think it's interesting that people are tuning in to this type of content because realistically, like I said, I don't watch streamers, but at the same time, it's also, how can you watch 10 days of streaming of someone being humiliated constantly? I don't understand who would want to do that simply because I can understand the curiosity of wanting to see a clip or seeing what those streams are like. I can understand that. The thing is, I'm wondering how you amass an audience that is fine with seeing you be tortured, humiliated, whatever, for 10 days. Now, I know that there were prior challenges, and it seems like this was the general type of content that JP made, and that's another story. But I'm just wondering who exactly is watching this and why. And like I said prior, I don't really think we can solely blame platforms because at the end of the day, we humans are the ones who are subscribing, following, watching, whatever. So the question is a larger question about why it is that people are watching this in the first place. But I do think that the platforms contribute to all of this because, like I said prior, if you are on platforms that seemingly censor a lot of completely mild, non-issue things, what are you going to do? You're going to seek the platform that censors, seemingly regulates, seemingly nothing. And the thing is, so long as everyone's moderate, that will not go poorly. The thing is, when we see content like this, when we see people stream for 10 days being abused in all sorts of ways, and people in the chat just laughing it off and thinking it's hilarious, we have a very big issue because it's a lose-lose. On this platform, you can't say anything. On this platform, you can do anything seemingly. And there's no middle ground where, there's an ideal type of balance, which granted is going to be hard to attain, but it seems like right now it is extremely polarized in one way or the other. So interestingly enough, a lawyer for one of the two co-streamers that were obviously streaming with Pormanove told BFM television the victim had cardiovascular problems and that the violence in the videos was acted. All those scenes are just staged. They follow a script, he said. French media have shown excerpts of hours-long videos during which Pormanove is seen suffering blows, insults, strangulation, dousing with paint and oil, and being shot at with a paintball gun. It was not clear from the excerpts whether Pormanove had subjected himself to the violence voluntarily or was forced to endure it, nor whether the action was real or staged. This is the other interesting aspect of this, is whether this was real or staged, which to a degree, I don't even know how much that matters in the big picture, because in a way, I think staged is so much worse because you really sat down and planned out, hey, okay, so these are the things we're going to do. We already know that that's kind of how it works back in the day, even when there were YouTube prank channels. a lot of that was obviously staged. So this is in no way new, but it's very odd to think about people kind of deciding to be violent, quote unquote violent, I suppose, based on some general plan that they made and banking on that. Because not only does that show how predictable audiences are that they'll tune in to see the violence, but also the fact that you are entirely okay with taking all of these risks. Because as much as there's no way to defend any of this behavior, it's also one thing if it had been a question of they took things too far in the moment, they weren't thinking, and this happened, and that's tragic. That to me is less calculated and more understandable, not justifiable, but understandable, than, hey, let's sit down and make a plan of how we're going to basically simulate abuse for 10 days and then just make money off of it, question mark. Planned or unplanned, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't make that big of a difference because the result is still the result. But I do wonder how this is going to work going forward, because hopefully this puts some kind of precedent for Kick to regulate more or to hire more people for their own online safety. Also because I don't really know who this man's audience was, but if children tuned into this, because children or younger demographics typically do watch challenges more than, say, 30 and 40-year-olds, I am curious as to how this affects them mentally, and also just the concept of seeing someone basically die in front of your eyes potentially if you were tuned in. I understand that it wasn't a gory death, but nonetheless, that is something I'm glad to never have witnessed, because I feel like that would fuck anyone up, honestly. Even if you don't know the person, you're not friends with them in a parasocial way, I suppose. Like I said, the clips are circulating on Twitter, so I would be very careful. People on Twitter are further demonstrating my point that people are treating this gleefully as if it was some silly, like a death in a show, you know, not like an actual person dying on stream, which is so dystopian and scary that I barely know how to discuss this without feeling like we are in some kind of terrifying simulation. But anyway, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always. I'll catch you guys next time.